Well, hello, welcome to the video. This one's about one of the greatest performers and recording artists of all time. That's Howlin' Wolf. And what I'm going to tell you about him, I'm going to delve down deep, and a lot of stuff I'm going to tell you will probably surprise you. So stick with me till the end, it's not very long, and let's get going.
If you just understand.
First of all, Chester Arthur Burnett was named after a very obscure American president called Chester Arthur, I think his name was, something like that. And he was born in 1910 in Mississippi. Though he drifted around the South, Arkansas, Mississippi, all around that area for most of his young life. It was a very complicated childhood. His father was described, well, he described him later as an Ethiopian, and his mother was descended from Choctaw Indians. So he had a very diverse culture. To start with, he lived, when his father and his mother separated, his father went off to work, and his mother raised the young Chester. But unfortunately, there was I'm not sure what happened to the mother, but he went to live with his uncle, who had a big house, and he was a bit of a slave driver in the literal sense, and made Chester work in the fields day and night. And there was a big falling out. There's no way that I can comprehend what was happening in Mississippi or Arkansas back in the 1920s and 1930s. Chester got angry and killed a hog for some reason. I think it's because the hog messed up his Sunday clothes, because he and his mother, when he was with his mother, used to sing in the choirs, and that's where he learned to sing and got his ear for music. This hog messed up his Sunday best and he killed it, and his uncle wasn't very happy about that and beat him, and Chester ran away, and he walked for miles, like 80 miles in his bare feet, to live with his father. And he did. He eventually got into the blues. Don't forget, at that time it was very country blues down in Arkansas where he was, and he got in with Charley Patton, who is one of the best well-known of these country blues performers, and Charley Patton taught him how to play the guitar, which is amazing in itself. And he also met Sonny Williamson, who taught him how to play the harmonica. You couldn't have two better teachers than that. He was a very imposing figure from the start, because he was 6'3" by this time, and in those days he was 275 pounds, which again, at his peak, I think he was 300 pounds, which in European parlance, just short of 140 kilos, which is quite a lot of kilos, I think you'll agree. So he's a very imposing performer. He had a fantastic voice. The name Howlin' Wolf came from the fact that his uncle, who was a Choctaw Native American, he told him a story about if he was naughty, the Howlin' Wolves would come and get him. All this time he's actually performing, Chester is actually farming at the same time. First as a farm labourer, and secondly he managed to buy his own tractor, so he was quite a serious farmer, but he's also a very serious musician. His fame spread, and a young A&R man for Sam Phillips, who would later form Sun Records. And this A&R man, he was very young, I think he was about 19 or something like that. This man was Ike Turner, who would subsequently go on to be one of the most influential people in rock and roll. And he heard about this guy, Howlin' Wolf, and he went down to see him. This was in 1951, so Howlin' Wolf would have been 41, so no spring chicken. First time he walked into a club, which I believe is in West Memphis, he was blown away and signed him. Sam Phillips recorded him at his studio, which became the Sun Studios, obviously. Sun Records hadn't started then, so the two tracks he recorded, he licensed them to Chess Records. And those two tracks were How Many More Years and Moaning at Midnight, which, if he recorded nothing else, those were two fantastic tracks. And his voice in those early recordings is phenomenal. Sam Phillips also recorded more things with Howlin' Wolf, and he leased those to another label, but Chess Records was so impressed by Howlin' Wolf that they signed him up. Now, later on, Sam Phillips, who of course would find Elvis Presley and record him, after he'd found Elvis Presley, said that Howlin' Wolf was the best live performer he'd ever seen. So that's praise indeed. In those early recordings, he was still quite frenetic. It was still the country blues, but eventually he became more of the Chicago blues, and he moved to Chicago and he got a new guitar player called Hubert Sumlin, who stayed with him off and on for most of his career. And Hubert Sumlin's guitar style was a perfect foil for Howlin' Wolf's powerful voice and strident delivery. Even the sound, just the sound, it just knocks me out. I mean, how many years later is it? It's like decades and decades later, and they were recorded on very rudimentary equipment. Coming up for not quite 100 years ago, but it won't be long before it is 100 years, put it that way. So how time flies when you're having fun, eh? At this stage, could I just say, as we're having so much fun, if you like this, please like. If you're enjoying what I do, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Don't forget to comment too, let me know what you think. And let's get on with Howlin' Wolf. Of course, one of Howlin' Wolf's biggest influences was coming to the United Kingdom, where people like the Rolling Stones, who had their first #1 with Little Red Rooster, which of course was a Howlin' Wolf track.
I am the little red rooster. Too late to the crow today.
The Rolling Stones and Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton and people like that were amazed by Howlin' Wolf. And when they saw him, I think his first show was with an American tour, which was organised by a German company, and they all went to see this as it performed famously in Manchester, and it was filmed by Granada TV. And Howlin' Wolf brought the house down. He was incredible. He came back to do more tours and things like that, and he played at places like the 100 Club, the Marquee and all that, and I just wish I was old enough to have been at one of those shows, but unfortunately, no. His big break in the USA came in 1965, and ironically, after the Rolling Stones had had their first #1 hit with Little Red Rooster, they insisted when they were asked to appear on the Shindig American TV program that Howlin' Wolf joined them as their special guest. And he did, and he was amazing.
But I was doing right. You couldn't believe a word I say.
And he did a famous album called the London Howlin' Wolf Sessions with various members of the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton, and I suppose this is sacrilege, but I don't think that's his best. And also he did an album in '69 which was like a psychedelic album with psychedelic musicians under pressure from his record label, and on the cover of that album quite a bit of pre-social media hype. It said Howlin' Wolf does not like this album, and it was also true. And frankly, I don't like the album either. It's okay, but I can remember speaking to Tony McPhee of the Groundhogs, who played with John Lee Hooker and people like that, and I'm pretty sure he played with Howlin' Wolf once or twice, and he said he was the nicest, most gentle but most talented man you ever saw. And when he started to sing, everybody just it was basically, Tony said it was like a real struggle to carry on playing because you just wanted to stop and listen. But afterwards he said that being part of it was just amazing. So there you go, Howlin' Wolf. Unfortunately, he was also dogged by ill health his whole life. He had heart problems. He was very, very big, although on stage he could move like James Brown, who incidentally, when Howlin' Wolf was in the army, because he was called up in the 1940s during the Second World War, and he was in what is called the Buffalo Soldiers. It was a cavalry outfit, which basically was an army outfit, which is purely made up of black servicemen, and they suffered all kinds of prejudice, but they were very proud of the work that they did. When he was in one of the camps where they were training, he would occasionally play on the stage in front of people, and one of the people who was there was a very young James Brown, who at the time used to go to these army camps and earn pocket money by shining shoes. And he said later that watching Howlin' Wolf inspired him to get into the whole music thing. And there's lots about Howlin' Wolf you probably didn't know. He's one of the very few blues people who could read and write music, although ironically perhaps he wasn't very good with reading and writing, because when he was staying with his uncle, he made him go into the fields and work rather than go to school and learn all these things. Later in life, he went back to school to learn basics like accountancy. He was one of the most financially astute bluesmen, and his players all got well paid and even health insurance. But he was never extravagant, and they always drove around in an old station wagon rather than a fancy new car. At the peak of his career, Howlin' Wolf went to see his mother in Mississippi and offered her money, which she refused because she said it was from him playing the devil's music, and he never really got over that. Towards the end of his life, he had to have kidney dialysis the whole time, every 3 days, I think, and his wife used to do that for him, so it meant he couldn't go too far afield. Towards the end of his life, he had a bad car accident where he went flying headfirst to the windscreen, and apparently that really messed up his kidneys for good. He checked himself in hospital in January 1976 and sadly died there a few days later, aged just 65, and that was the end of one of the greatest blues performers of all time. So check out Howlin' Wolf.
If you see me running, I'll come streaking by. You better run, boy.
Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch another video by me, and I suggest you do, this one I think will be rather up your street. Thank you again. Goodbye.